to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL round review of round 15. Thankfully, ladies and gentlemen, the bye rounds are over. No more of this 5, 6, or 7 games, 9 games from now on. Let's get into it. Let's join my panelists. From an earlier conversation, we have my two co-hosts today are from the Attention to Detail podcast. Everything you want to know about the Melbourne Demons. We have Tim, we have Simo. Gentlemen, thank you for hopping on today.
Thanks, Donnie. Good to see you, mate. Good to chat footy again.
Yeah, awesome to be on, mate. Always happy to chat about footy with you, mate. And yeah, ready to launch into it.
Fantastic, fantastic. It's not going to be all D's today. We're going to go a little bit deeper, but we will thankfully get to talk about the Demons a little bit. So really, really quickly, kind of glass half full right off the top, on the top of the table, thoughts on round 15. Tim, let's start with you. What an interesting 6 games of footy.
It definitely was. It was, as you mentioned, like to have the bye spread over so many weeks now to sort of be, only have a few games to watch. I mean, for this purpose, it was actually much easier to try and get a bit of a handle on most of the games. In its entirety, probably only a couple of the games were actually good games to watch. I think from a neutral perspective, I think that the Melbourne-Geelong game on Thursday night was probably good from a neutral perspective, given that was a hard contest. And then it's probably hard not to go by Sunday afternoon, Adelaide and Collingwood, which was an all-time classic. So the other games, I think, like you can talk the whitewash that the Sydney gave, the bath that they gave West Coast, and I'm sure we'll get to that a bit later. But yeah, not an overly exciting round, but certainly some strong talking points from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a good round actually. Yeah, it was like I said, Tim, just having the game spread out, you could kind of sink your teeth into all of them, and as a keen super coacher, you can really get a gauge as who's going well and who's going through role changes and things. So I mean, that's what side of footy I look at, in particular when the D's aren't playing. So yeah, got some questions answered, which is pretty cool. And yeah, in the lead up to the end of the season, it's going to be a bit of a, well, then again, it's a really tight season this year, and you can label from 5th to 14th, which is I think maybe a game or two between them. So yeah, ready to sink the teeth into the last 9 rounds.
Yeah, it'll be very, very interesting. I know going into this round, I said in my show last week, I was like, I looked at this and there was only one game that I was kind of like, it could be ugly, and that was Sydney West Coast, and we were proven right. But I was a little surprised in a couple of these, got a little out of hand in games I thought were honestly going to be pretty competitive. So let's sink our teeth into these 6 games. Unfortunately, gentlemen, I know this isn't always easy to talk about, but we'll start of it. Kardinia Park, GMHBA, whatever they want to call it. The Cats get another win at home by 15, 78-63 over the D's. Gentlemen, as diehard D's fans, your thoughts on this game? Because honestly, I think a lot of the main media and even myself went into this game going, Cats weakened midfield, no Dangerfield. This was ripe for the picking for the D's, and it just something wasn't right, and I don't know what it was. Your guys' thoughts on what may have ailed the D's in this game?
I'll go first, mate. I think our mid to full connection is still just so inconsistent. It's not funny, and our ability to kick a decent score in probably the last 5-6 weeks is starting to hurt us in games. And I think inaccurate kicking was probably our main reason why we're doing so well at the start of the season. But for now, I think we've kicked 8-13, 8-18, and I think 8-15 on the weekend. So it's going, it's not going well in that perspective. And it's hard to sort of put your finger on as to what's going wrong. I think having Clary out's pretty big. I feel like our forward connection's still not there. I don't know what our right mix is. I don't know what to do with Gordon Grundy. It's something that, I mean, well, I'm just hoping we hit the straps at the right time. But, it's a tough ask in footy to go down to Geelong, and you've got a pretty average record. But there was stats showing that we've had the most games ever since the AFL changed, or become the AFL from VFL. We've had the most games down at Geelong, which doesn't make much sense considering, probably what crowd we could draw.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not probably as optimistic as that with what Simo was just touching on there, but I think it's a really, really big opportunity that Melbourne, let slip through their fingers again. And it's probably a bit of a pattern that's been, as Sim mentioned before, going on the last few weeks. Now, the chances at goals, I'm not overly concerned about because we're getting 20, 25 scoring shots most of these. We're not finishing our work, which is certainly part of the issue. I think the biggest thing that happened on Thursday night that you watch Melbourne dominate a number of key areas, so contested ball, clearances, and then for to really have all the momentum, like we were doing all the hard work, really on top of most of those key indicators, but only had a 7 point lead going to three-quarter time. For the capitulation that happened in that last quarter is something probably very un-Melbourne like, I would say. Like I think I looked at that last quarter, like Geelong scored 6 goals from 9 inside 50s, which is just absolutely insane efficiency. Melbourne, pride themselves on keeping teams to low scores. Now, for them to go over and double what they already had for the entire game in that last quarter is extremely disappointing. And I was absolutely gutted watching that last quarter. It was, watching it from my lounge room. My wife was listening to me yell at the TV. I was ready to turn it off for the 10-minute mark because it was, it was just watching another one of those opportunities. Players out the side. I don't. Clary is such a big out for us as well. Players out aside for Geelong, as I said, the game was there for the taking, and then the pressure and the intent didn't carry over into the fourth quarter, and the Cats just wanted it more.
Well, and I think a little bit too, and it's something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, is the fact that they also did that without Jeremy Cameron. Like Jeremy Cameron gets knocked off by Gary Rowan, and I love the narrative so many people are talking about is if Gary Rowan would have been wearing a Melbourne shirt, he would have got 3 weeks for a head-high contact. And I'm like, seriously, just stop. I understand that you're trying to talk concussion, but that it's a hypothetical that's just stupid. But the fact that Jeremy Cameron wasn't there and this happened again, and I think sometimes Gary Rowan is kind of a bane of Geelong fans because he can have games where he's absolutely electric, and then there's games where he's the great white ghost. He just disappears. Brad Close is another one, having a great game that occasionally can disappear. So this is a Cats team that, especially on that deck, there's just something about them. I don't know what it is. And it's really, really weird. And I know there was all the talk about Melbourne going down to Geelong and practicing on GMHBA. And does that give them? I was like, really? I said, this was almost the media making a really big deal out of something that's not. I said, this happens all the time in other sports. So I don't really see where it's a big deal. Did it give them an advantage? Well, looking at the final score, it obviously didn't. So I really, again, mountain out of a molehill. This is a frustrating one for me because I think this for the D, and I know probably for you D's fans, you look at the top of the ladder and you go, ugh, because now you're 2 games back, 3 games back from Collingwood and Port Adelaide. And you're sitting in that spot where you're kind of in that no man's purgatory because you're starting to kind of creep back towards the pack in fifth and sixth and seventh. So it's kind of a creepy thing to kind of look at. And the Cats, they loom large there, that ninth spot. But how does the Jeremy Cameron injury kind of affect the next couple of rounds? Because he won't play this week due to the HIA and 12-day restriction. So they get to go up to Sydney without Jeremy Cameron. We'll see how that goes. But it was a fascinating one. I remember watching it and just going, it was so, I agree with you. So on Melbourne, like that fourth quarter, kind of letting things get out of hand with the defense that they have. So we jumped to another one that I was really shocked got out of hand. I thought, again, Rossi Lyon has always been relatively good defensively. So for them to kind of get blown out on Marvel's deck by 28 by the Brisbane Lions, who again, I don't think are as good off of the Gabba turf as they are on the Gabba turf as they are anywhere else. So, the Lions beat the Saints. This was an interesting game, and the Lions showed they can win one in Victoria. We still don't know about the MCG, which is still the question on everybody's mind, but get a win in Victoria over a finals, looking like potentially finals team in St. Kilda. So your thoughts, Tim, on this one?
I think one of the biggest talking points from this is I wouldn't say the return of Harris Andrews, but I think you're seeing a fully fit now captain of the Brisbane Lions really leading that defensive unit. And I think the ability for Jackson Payne now to see the job that he did on King and, keep him to 0 goals, 0 marks, and then allow Harris Andrews to kind of roam. It reminds me kind of like what Melbourne does with Jake Lever and Stephen May in terms of being able to like that in that structure defensively. Now, Brisbane have never been a team that you've really labelled as a defensive unit, but I think we just saw that part of it was probably St Kilda's butchering going inside 50 as well and kicking straight to Andrews, but I think that was a really big asset for them. And then I think the only other thing that really, I said the only other thing, like Eric Hipwood being able to, get a few goals on the board as well too, and just to get him firing. I still can't quite get a read on where they're at. And as you mentioned, like their record at the G is just like comedic compared to, and for them to come out and do it at the Saints' home ground. I don't know if it spells too much of a worry for the Saints, but it also doesn't really give me much of a read on Brisbane. So it's kind of it's a funny one. Like it's like Brisbane, I think heading into the home stretch, like we saw last year, like even going into the semi final against us last year, I still didn't think they were really a top four team. Like I think they still have a lot to prove in that space. They've certainly gotten better around the ball. Like they've got some good young kids in there, like Ashcroft. Um, the poise and the class of McCluggage and Rayner, up front of them, like the addition of Dunkley this year as well has proven some small increments in improving, but I think they've still got a way to go to prove to competition like where they're actually at.
Tell you what, Tim, you're taking a lot of words off me there. I'm a bit speechless as to where to go with this. But yeah, the one with the Brisbane, obviously they're unbeatable at their home ground, really, and you don't win grand finals at the Gabba. I mean, you did in 2020, but yeah, not this year. But it seems like Brisbane usually do pretty well at Marvel, and I think they're kind of like, Port Adelaide, those two interstate clubs. They come across and somehow play that ground well, but then the MCG is a bit of a different story. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me for the Lions is probably the addition, or definitely the addition of Josh Dunkley, who's pretty much killed Jared Lyons, mind you. Who Jared Lyons was probably near enough to an All-Australian over the last few years. But yeah, I think Dunkley's impact both in the air, on the ground, and a bit of everything. Now kicking goals, I think he kicked 9 behinds before a goal. Might have been his first goal last week, I believe. I think just he's been massive, and I think Lachie Neale is starting to get back to his best as well. So they're obviously forming a pretty strong midfield, and I think they've probably got the best attack in the league. I think, and I think by having, like you said, about Harris Andrews, if they can show up their defence, they're going to be pretty tough to beat at the pointy end.
Yeah, they'll be tough. And the other thing too is Will Ashcroft and Jasper Fletcher have started to kind of show why there was so much talk about them going into the draft years. I mean, everybody kind of knew Ashcroft was the resounding number one. There was no discussion, but Jasper Fletcher was getting some talk about, and for them both to be there and to have Lachie Neale, have Dunkley, have McCluggage, there's a lot of really, really good talent. I'm one of those, I look at it and I go, do I trust Hipwood, Danaher, and Cameron every day come finals time? We'll have to see, because sometimes one, two, or even all three can disappear at times. So Brisbane's another team like they Jekyll and Hyde me a lot. They have games where they look absolutely unbeatable. They can score on anybody. They look absolutely deadly. And then there's games that they just disappear. And it's weird because there is so much talent. You look at the spine of this team and you're like, scary, scary, scary on each line of this team. I mean, Kitty Coleman is down from last year. Last year he used to be absolutely electric with footy in hand, and this year he's kind of been underwhelming a lot. I mean, the fact that Daniel Rich is not even in this side right now and they're still playing really well. Again, is Daniel Rich getting closer to the end than the beginning? Absolutely. But this is a team where on their day they could be absolutely outstanding. But I'm still, it does breed a few more questions on St. Kilda, because again, they have been helter-skelter since the start of the year. It's almost like they've gotten the old boys back, and some of the old problems that happened under previous coaches are starting to rear their ugly heads. So it'll be very interesting to see St. Kilda as we move on through the season. Okay, everybody knows I am a diehard Swans fan, but this was a game, as happy as I was to see the final score, and there was more of me that was disappointed in this game because I hoped West Coast would at least show up. I don't know who showed up in blue and yellow and blue and gold for this weekend, but it was definitely not an AFL side. 171 point loss as the 200 point barrier is broken, 205 to 34. And the entire conversation since this game ended has been, what's going to happen? I agree, and I understand. Not everybody's going, well, look at Sydney's dynamic offense because, as the common quote, witches hats everywhere. In fact, I even saw a meme somewhere that said witches hats are offended that West Coast was being called witches hats. So it gave me a few chuckles on that one. So, gentlemen, as outsiders looking in, did you guys watch this game? And I know the Swans fans are absolutely celebrating because some of the youngsters went absolutely hog wild. Luke Parker, Errol Goulden, Hayden McLean, Isaac Heaney, Joel Armati. I mean, a lot of the guys that Sydney needs to potentially maybe push towards finals, probably not, but you never know. Had a huge confidence booster with a tough game against Geelong coming up.
I'll go first. I watched the second half of this game, and well, I saw the scores at halftime. I'm like, oh great! I actually put a bet on and put West Coast at the line of like 70 points, and I'm like, I thought they might have shown up, but yeah, that was blown out already in the first half, and yeah, I was just fascinated about the way West Coast went about it. Like, there's been comparisons to like under 14 footy, like just a bunch of players like ball watching. All it took was a Sydney handball out of congestion, and there was just four blokes just by themselves. It was a pretty ugly display by the Eagles, and I think it probably has given a lot of players confidence. In particular, I was just looking at stats just then, and even players like a James Rowbottom, 27 and 13 tackles, like he had a day out. I saw Heaney and Warner just stepping blokes left, right, and centre. I think there might have been a time where I reckon Warner could have kicked 7, 8 goals. He was just he was just at just so much space, and he was just he could have easily had shots on goal, but he was like 30 out, and he started hitting people up on the lead. And yeah, can you imagine if Buddy was playing? It could have been saying 13 again, I reckon.
I heard that.
It's yeah. Look, I didn't see. I only sort of watched a bit of it on the replay. I was out Saturday afternoon, but I was messaging a mate who was a Sydney fan, and like at quarter time, saw the scores, and I think they kicked 9 goals in the first quarter or something. I thought,
Mhm.
oh yeah, here we go, and then yeah, watching sort of the highlights and the replay and listening to the commentary about it. But like the effort of the West Coast players just astounded me, and they can't use the excuse of injuries like they could probably a few weeks back, where yes, they've still got a number of players on the sideline, but you're looking at the efforts of their senior players who are supposed to be the role models of these young crop that are coming in, but they're not even that young. I mean, as I said, like the efforts of like Petrocelli and Dom Sheed at times where they're not even they're putting one arm out to try and tackle. Like it was really bruise free footy, and you probably can't like. It is a game where rarely, and history sort of speaks in itself, where the coach doesn't survive this. Now they've come out and backed Adam Simpson, and I think, that's a whole nother conversation in itself about what's the right way to go there. But I think the players certainly have to own up to it. Like they have to be the ones that cop some of the flack on that because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are on the ground. Like there's only so much Simo can do from the coach's box. And yeah, for Sydney just to run rampant, like 50 scoring shots, like we say 200 points, but 31-19, like it could have been so
Mhm.
much worse. It could have got to the 200 mark. Like it's just absolutely insane. It was just party time for the Swans. And yeah, look, I think again, like it's probably hard to get a read on the Swans as well too in terms of like where that comes. I think next week coming up against Geelong will be a huge game. Like to see where they kind of like that'll kind of light the fire a little bit under them, and it'll prove to be a huge clash and a grand final rematch. Now, yeah, Donnie, all too well how that ended last year, but hopefully it's a bit more competitive and we see a bit more of a competitive edge from both sides. But look, it's going to be the talking point from the whole round, and yeah, West Coast. All you'd ask for them next week is some effort. All you'd ask
Mhm.
for them is to go out and lay tackles and just show some grit because it was far from it on Saturday afternoon.
Well, and the other thing too is I remember watching First Crack and some of the analysis shows, and the biggest thing and I love what Joey Montana said is that it's very easy to fire the coach. It's the stopgap to every single bad situation. But I agree with what he said. Why aren't we looking at the list management who continues to keep these older players around when you probably could have shipped a few off this last offseason and tried to at least get some capital for guys that you knew aren't going to be there very much longer, like a Nick Naitanui, like an Elliot Yeo, like a Luke Shuey, like a Mitch McGovern. You may not get much, but get something instead of just having them retire. And then the high performance. Why are these guys literally crapping out in the middle of the second quarter, and then third and fourth quarters having absolutely no effort? And then I don't know if you guys have seen it. Their actual high performance person has stepped away, has been
Yeah, saw
stepped
that.
down. So the first domino has happened. We'll see. Do more. Does the CEO of the club go? Because I don't honestly, Simpson can only do so much. He can't make them make the kicks. He can't make them have the efforts. So I kind of understand, and I at least a little bit appreciate that for one time they're not just going to do the cheap, easy. Let's get rid of the coach, because what caretaker coach is going to be able to fix this? Because they can't step there and help these guys do the little things that should be on the field. So I mean, I completely agree with you. This is a huge confidence booster. Does it really say much about the Swans? Not really. The one thing for the Swans is they do have Tommy McCartan coming back for this game with no Jeremy Cameron. So there's a little bit of intrigue, at least for the Swans here with that game at the SCG. We'll discuss that a little bit later. But again, this was one of those, as happy as I was, this was horrible. This was absolutely horrible. We'll discuss a little bit more on, was this a
Donnie,
blight? Go
did you
ahead.
notice, sorry to jump in, did you notice, and I was trying to figure out how I could try and calculate or look at it. Did you see what the percentage boost was? Because I was trying, like, you guys jumped up to, I think, 118. I didn't see what it was prior to that game,
I
so I would have loved to
believe
see
I
how
believe
many
it was
percentage
somewhere
points.
around 95, and they're at 113.3 now. So it was something like 18. It was something like 18%. Yeah, it
That's
was
mammoth.
it was absolutely insane. And it was kind of funny in the broadcast. They started showing the live ladder, and it was kind of funny because they said that going into the round they were 15th and like 90, it was like 95 or 96 something. And then by the end of it, they showed the live ladder and they said they're at 113.3, and they literally jumped four teams in the process of that happening, because the 24 points, you jump over Carlton, who has 22, and you jump over GWS, who's only at 97. So, and then you're right there, 2 points behind Richmond. So they're not 100. They kind of put themselves back in finals talk again, even though I think after last round, everybody had kind of, they put the proverbial fork in the Swans. We'll have to see. But yeah, it was something like
It's handy that.
18%. It was absolutely mental. That like I said, I remember the broadcast, them showing that it was like a live ladder. They're like, look at the difference from the start. So it was kind of interesting. So I had a
Okay.
little chuckle at that. So right from that game, we jump out to Perth into Optus Stadium as the Fremantle Dockers finally kind of find and right the ship par se, as they beat the Essendon Bombers 93-61, a 32-point win. And I look at this and I go, Sean Darcy back, Dockers play well. Is Sean Darcy that important to the Dockers? Because it was like he steps in, and some of the mistakes that had happened, some of the miscommunications or breakdowns a little bit with ruck taps and kind of their clearance abilities kind of magically disappeared because the big man was back on the field.
I'll
Yeah.
start here, and I was going to say I
Yeah,
can
take all my
label.
talking points here as well, Tim.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I to chime in with this one, and I think we saw it firsthand, and that's the ability for Luke Jackson to just be used anywhere. He tore Essendon apart. I don't know who was playing on Luke Ryan, but he was just chopping up marks left, right, and centre. It's kind of a weird one, but the biggest thing, I mean, I didn't watch much of this game, but the two things I can really think of is two ex-Melbourne players. I hate to put Sammy Wiedemann in this forefront, but Sam Wiedemann had an absolute mare. I don't know if you watched that part of the game, but poor Essendon fans now having to endure, should he be playing, shouldn't he be playing? We've gone through it as well. But Luke Jackson's rise, in particular over the last 6 weeks, yeah, they're starting to get some worth out of him, and I think they're maybe 5-1, maybe 5-2 since I suppose they've kind of turned their season around, obviously from a slow start, but the what Luke Jackson provides for them is so much flexibility, and we're missing that big time because, Luke Jackson's at the ground level and, it's a bit of a different story with Jackson and Gawn as opposed to Gawn and Grundy at this point in time. And yeah, it's a bit sad to see, but good for him. It's he's gone home, he's given us a flag, so I mean, can't be too frustrated, but I think Tim will jump in with a bit of Freo watch because we're always very interested with that one.
No, look, I was going to echo your point on Jackson. I think you see the biggest shift structurally that Freo did is that they didn't play Jacko on the ruck at all on Saturday night. So I watched this whole game start to finish, and they played Jackson predominantly forward, and it just allowed Darcy to kind of concentrate on ruck craft. And I think they even just threw, I think it was either Tracy or a miss into the secondary ruck role. Like they just literally used Jackson as a bit of an on-baller up the ground and as a deep forward. And it took a couple of nice contested marks. Got a cheap and easy goal in the goal square. But again, like Simo said, he did. He looked amazing. Like his size still surprises me as well too, and like how agile he is for the size that he is. I still remember when Melbourne drafted him, how skinny he was. So he's obviously made a bit of an impact there. I think the other thing I noticed from Freo as well, and probably games gone past, is that they really were able to dominate at the coalface in centre clearance. So they scored like 4 goals, 4 from centre clearances, which is a huge difference from where they've been in the past. And I think the AFL average is only about a goal a game from centre clearance. So for them to sort of get on top of that, like you saw the likes of Sarong and Brayshaw really get on top in the middle, because the Bombers in the first 10 minutes were all over it and they were owning the footy. And then Freo were just able to sort of wrestle it, get back control, and then we were able to see them really kind of stave off any sort of Essendon attack. Essendon didn't really look like getting back in it. Stringer was probably the only one that every now and then looked slightly dangerous, but every time sort of Essendon tried to hold the ball up, they just didn't look like they were going to take advantage of anything. And as Simo mentioned, Luke Ryan was mopping up everything down the back. He's just, dictating everything, orchestrating the ball movement. You're watching them change lanes. They were very creative, and probably a lot different to where we've seen them at certain parts of this season. So they certainly got their season back on track. And look, over at home in Perth, like it's almost as good as a win as it's going to be, I think.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. It was kind of one of those, the old story is if you play a Perth team in Perth, you're most likely going to lose because they're always strong. And then it's flipped a little bit. It was West Coast. Now it's kind of Fremantle. It'll be interesting. Essendon's another one of those that they kind of come back to earth a little. They come back to earth a little bit, a little bit like St. Kilda after kind of the great start this year. It'll be fascinating to keep an eye on it. Again, I agree. Like, I like Darcy being there and letting Jackson just kind of be that floater. Let him go into the middle a little bit, put him out on the wing, let him go forward. Don't kind of structure him only to the ruck, because I think with his athleticism, you kind of let him have to. He's a matchup nightmare when he's not in the ruck. Absolute matchup nightmare. So I appreciate that Coach Longmuir at least made a little attempt to kind of loosen him up a little bit, which I think was absolutely fantastic. So we jump to it. Game of the round, MCG, Collingwood v Adelaide, a 2-point win by the Pies. The Pies do it again. But this was a game that was quite interesting because the Pies looked really dominant at halftime, and the Crows came out the second half and said, I don't think so, and punched the Pies in the mouth. And it took the Pies a little bit to kind of bounce back. Again, they get the win at home. That huge crowd, Magpie Army, kind of always brings this team. They're just never out of it. But if I'm a Crows supporter and I listen to a couple of Crows podcasts, there's no love lost for this Crows team. In fact, there's a lot of almost confidence come out of this, because one of the favorites for winning the flag, they've taken to the wire in both of their games. Yeah, they may have come up short, but they're right there. I mean, are the Crows fans a little off because the Pies did win both games, or would you be confident as a Crows supporter, because I mean, you took the Pies twice to the wire?
Oh, I'm actually really sad I missed this game. I actually had a wedding on Sunday. But looking at the result, I was just like, what the hell happened in that third quarter? Was it? I believe Tex might have kicked 3 in the quarter and just took the game by the scruff of the neck. And just Rory Laird and Dawson. I think Dawson's arguably one of the best captains and one of the best pickups in a trade period we've seen in recent times. I think just what he does. I think I saw a stat on one of the AFL shows last night even. His games against top 8 sides are just through the roof. He kind of goes a little bit it takes a bit of a back seat against the lesser sides, but his games in the big games against the good sides is up there with the best in the competition. And, you saw that on the weekend. His ability could have easily potentially had a match winner again, like he did in the Derby, I believe, last year.
Mhm.
He get to go after the siren. But yeah, he could have easily had a shot, which, mind you, is a lot of controversy around that lack of free kick there. But I suppose, Tim, you'd be able to share more about what happened in this game. But it shows that Adelaide are the real deal. I mean, they're going to scare some sides, in particularly at home. I think they've been amazing. And to now, only to just fall down to Collingwood, well, now twice, it's showing their brand is, stacks up against the best sides. And we play them in a few weeks at the MCG, so yeah, I mean, you got to take the speed off them because they're youthful, they're quick. They got Burjo as well, which bloody hell, I feel like we're missing him big time. So yeah, your turn, Tim. I think you have a few good things to say about this.
It was an incredible game. Now I watched the replay. I was out all day Sunday, but I watched the whole game yesterday. And even knowing the result, Donnie, we were talking about watching the games where you know the result. It was still an amazing game to watch, even knowing what the result was, because to see how it all unfolded, as you mentioned, Collingwood's sort of dominance in that first half, they were clearly all over it. And I think the most impressive thing is that, yeah, you're watching this young Adelaide side kind of rise, but I think also the coaching of Matthew Nicks as well too, and the ability to sort of change the game plan. They've been there before, as you mentioned. Their previous games have been almost very similar in that sense. Their ability to restrict Collingwood not to be able to use the corridor. And we've seen this, like Melbourne did this the other day as well too. The other week, we've seen that teams that are able to get on top of Collingwood in parts of the game restrict their ball movement. They lock the ball in the forward half, and that's what we saw. I think we saw a lot of, as Simo said, some of the youth of Adelaide just really provide that spark. Jordan Dawson was massive. Tex Walker again. It's a look. His misdemeanors off the field, weren't good, and it's been, I suppose, if you can kind of put that behind you, to watch his resurgence this year is kind of a nice story in itself, because he again almost single-handedly took that game by the scruff in that third quarter. He looked dangerous in that first half as well too. Just wasn't finishing off the work, or wasn't able to get wasn't going to capitalise on any of the efforts there. But to kick the 7 goals in that third quarter, like I think it ended up being 8 consecutive goals, I think, from the last goal in the first half to then into the third quarter, was amazing. And as you know, Collingwood are never out of it, and it's we marvel at it as neutral spectators. And Simo, we talked about this the other week as well too. I still don't know how sustainable it is for them to continue to do this, but yet again, they prove us wrong. And look, like the Dacos 50-meter, like I still don't know what, the fact that he was just having a chat to the umpire, and the umpire then agreed to him, oh yeah, no, it should be 50 meters, I'll agree with you, and then walk it up to the front. And yeah, it was it was bizarre. But I think Adelaide Crows, they do have to take a lot of confidence out of that, but at the same time, it would sting. It would sting a little bit. I think when Tex kicks that goal to put him back within 2 points, there was a number of contests there where they looked dangerous, and probably an unlucky missed free kick to Jordan Dawson, but also at the same time, it was very quick and split second. Now, on the replay, it looks a lot easier to pinpoint when you're slowing it down.
Mhm.
It still begs the question that you've got 4 umpires out there. How are we not seeing these things? So it was an amazing game.
Well, it's one of those, and and again, social media is always ripe with those type of things. It's Crows got robbed. It's like, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, if you pinpoint and if you sit there and absolutely watch everything, there's tons of missed calls in this game. I understand it's late. It could have affected the game, but there's about 8 probably calls 20 minutes earlier that probably could have affected the game just as much. So as much as I understand the gripe for the Crows fans, and again, 100% understand it, the AFL even came out, which I agree with what many Crows fans go, what good is that going to do? It's not going to change the result. They're not going to go back and go, Collingwood Adelaide, you got to play the rest of the game because the umpires made a mistake. We got to go back onto the field and fix it. They're not going to do that. So it's the one thing is like, I understand the AFL coming out and saying it, but what really does it do? Like, what really does it do? It really isn't going to change anything. It's not going to. And then I want to bring this up only, and some people would say, you're an American. This is why you're bringing it up. The whole Ben Keys, Mason Cox, the whole little melee / rip off the glasses. I'm kind of tired of both sides are kind of being really, really petty about this. There's like, Keys is a flog. He tried to rip off Cox's thing. And then the Crows fans come back off, fuck, Cox is a flog because he went after a 7-gamer in Hinge. I'm like, guys, really? The whole thing is dumb. I mean, what Cox did was smart? No. I mean, why risk another chance of giving a free kick after you kick a goal? That's kind of dumb. And then Keys, I think Keys' explanation again, how much of this is true. I probably would agree with this. Is he was trying to grab the back of Cox's jumper and he missed because Bo McCreary pushes him. So that's why he grabs it. If you look at the picture, I probably am more keen to agree with Keys on that one. He probably wasn't going because I don't think anybody wants to grab somebody's spectacles. So I don't think that was done intentionally. But I'm just like, guys, stop making him out of molehill. Neither team got a 50. Nobody did something stupid. Keys gets to pay $1,500 for grabbing his things. Just let it go. It's really not a
Yeah.
big deal. Fantastic game. Again, was it marred a little bit because of an umpiring decision that was pretty darn obvious. Again, as you said, it's easy to say from the sidelines because we don't know. Like, I would love to see a still picture of where the umpires were and how obstructed their view was. I agree. High speed. 4 is never going to solve the problem. Again, everybody's saying 4 is going to fix all. No, it's not. There's always going to be missed calls everywhere. No, I have never witnessed and watched a game where every single Patreon sitting in the stands goes, you know what? They didn't do anything wrong. It's never going to happen.
No.
There's too many one-eyed supporters and there's too many people that are watching it from a television where they have Zoom. Okay. It's not going to happen. I've said many a times, I don't complain about umpiring decisions. I try not to because there's too many things in the game that I look at it and go, if I go to the Crows fans and I go, okay, yeah, they didn't get your free kick. Why did you kick 14 behinds?
Yeah.
You kick one of those behinds as a goal. That's your winner there. I'm sorry, that's on the Crows. 14
It wasn't,
behinds.
yeah. And it wasn't made a big deal about on the broadcast either until after the game. So it's like even in the real
Somebody got a
moments,
still of it. And somebody got a
yeah,
still, and then it explodes
yeah,
on social media, which it always does. Again, Crows fans, absolutely respect you. Played a hell of a game, but I mean, let it go. You're not going to get it to change. The AFL came out, said you're right again. I agree, but it's one of those just let her rest. Okay, and we
there was a
jump up. Go ahead.
couple of Adelaide players. I just want to quickly label Mitchell Hinge. Adelaide have found a couple of really good young players, and Mitchell Hinge and Saligo, I think it was. Watching them play with their energy and youth, like Hinge did some really courageous acts, and I hadn't seen these guys play before, so it was the first time I sort of sat down and watched Adelaide really much this season. But yeah, again, like next year, they get a couple more pieces. Like they're within the top 4 hunt. They're dangerous.
They're scary on their day. And then we jump up to a game that I was anticipating being a good one, and unfortunately was quite disappointed as the Gold Coast Suns lay the smack us down to the Hawthorn Hawks 101-34. And I don't want to say it, but I mean, this is a Hawks team that James Sicily seems to leave this team, and all of their structure behind the ball just kind of goes away. Again, Gold Coast is talented. Noah Anderson, Matt Rowell. I mean, so many young talented, but this was just a smashing. The Gold Coast kind of maybe made us kind of go, okay, maybe it was Carlton just a figment of one bad day.
Well, it showcases the side that doesn't play at the G much. Obviously, I've got all the time in the world to watch Gold Coast this year. I think they're a team that's been super strong at home. I mean, they pushed us to the brink. They've beaten they beat Geelong up there as well. It's they've started to gather some really good talent and talent that actually wants to stay. I think is the biggest thing, and obviously Rao and Anderson being best mates and starting something pretty strong there and. They'll just get better when Took Miller comes back. He's probably one that, they're really missing that can add another layer to this team. I think just or more so Bailey Humphrey from the last few weeks, obviously getting a rising star nod and things. And Sam Flanders as well was one that stood up as well. High draft pick, starting to showcase, why they're there and why they were a high draft pick. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head with James Sicily. I think Hawthorn are just a different side without him, to be fair. I mean, you saw that first half against Port where they got almost 100 points kicked against them, and then obviously turn it around in the second half. But the damage was done in that game, and yeah, it just looks like they're just got a lack of, I don't know. I mean, you look at all their major ball winners; they're all in the back half, and they got absolutely torched for inside 50s. It was just, yeah, just a mauling after they kicked the first 3 goals, I believe.
Mhm.
It was, yeah, it was a bit grim for Hawthorn because they obviously, I think they've won. Well, they won 3 of their past 4 or three of
Mhm.
their past 5. So they've been, starting to play some good footy, and their young talent starting to come through as well. So yeah, it was a bit disappointing and a huge step back for them. But that being said, I think Gold Coast, they could push for the finals. I mean, we'll have to look at their run home, but gee, it's going to be exciting, that push. And which on our notes we have there talking about, if the D's start dropping a few, it could be curtains for top 4, which is, yeah, it's going to be a tight finish. And yeah, if we do keep losing games, and these sort of sides, with more games at home, could pose a bit of a threat.
Definitely. I think it was such an even contribution from Gold Coast. I think, like, especially from a scoring point of view, there was no real standout, like in terms of a spearhead forward. Like King didn't have a dominant game. Roses popped up, and I think he kicked 3 goals in the last quarter. So
Mhm.
I think, again, you're watching probably one of the most underappreciated players in the game, and that is Noah Anderson. And like Simo touched on him before, but you know, you imagine this bloke playing for a Victorian club. He would be just talked about, day in, day out as one of the, a superstar in the making in terms of playing for a big powerhouse club. But as Simo said, like they are really enjoyable to watch. They play a good brand of footy. You feel for Stewie Jew, who's always got the heat pump, heat on his back all the time. Like his job seems never to be safe in terms of that. But hopefully that they are really building something there. Now they sit 7-7, and only a game or so out of the 8. So they're right in the mix. And if they do have, I don't know if Simo's checking the run home, but if they do have a considerable amount of games up at Heritage or Metricon Stadium, whatever it's called, they've proven that it is a tough game to win up there against the home side. So you're watching players that are developing some chemistry, and I think, as Simo mentioned before, like players that really want to be there and kind of build something together. You're watching that probably for the first time in Gold Coast's history, about a core group of players that can hopefully gain some continuity, and they can keep some of that top end talent up there. So for the Hawks, I think, Donnie, you took my first talking point, because it was defensively absolutely lost without Sicily. And I think nobody knew who was really covering his base in terms of that interceptor role. And yeah, I think they would just hopefully scratch that one and move on to the next one. Just, yeah, wouldn't be taking too much from that, I wouldn't think.
Yeah,
Talking
it's just
about,
go ahead.
I was going to say, just I was looking at the run home for them. They got 4 games at home, but they come against Collingwood, St Kilda, Brisbane, and Carlton up there. So they're going to be, I mean, Carlton not so much, but they'll be looking to turn that one around. But yeah, they've actually got a pretty tough run home. I mean, they've got Port Adelaide as well in Adelaide. They've got GWS, who have turned it on completely, but probably won't turn it on, I hope, against us this weekend, judging on that bye situation, which is interesting in itself.
Mhm.
Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, Sydney at the SCG, and North to finish. Like, they've got a bloody tough run home, so they're poor buggers, because yeah, it'd be good to see them finally debut in the finals.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Unfortunately, as you said, that run home is kind of a gauntlet. Unfortunately, if they make finals, they will have earned it for sure. So that is going to do it. 6 games, but a lot of talking points. Again, this was kind of one of those. There was a slim amount. There was so much to talk about, because it seemed like each game had some kind of point to talk about. So we jump to the burning questions of the episode. And from the original script, guys, because of producer Ross's question, I'm going to skip the first one and go straight to it, because I think this has been something every single podcast that I've listened to talks about this. It's almost getting monotonous to hear about it. West Coast had another massive loss. Again, another 100-point win, 171 points. They give up 200 points for the first time in the AFL in something like 15 years or whatever. So I asked this as an AFL fan, even though you're a D's fan, as AFL fan, is this a blight on the comp, or is this just really a blight on what many people say is one of the biggest clubs in the country?
It's not a blight on the competition. Absolutely not. It's West Coast have got this solely to blame for themselves. You touched on it earlier, Donny. It is up to the list management. They are the richest club in the competition. There is no excuse to say that it's a blight on the competition. They have the money. they've got this weird structure with their club that they're it's not like they're privatized, but like for Victorian clubs, like members can, like challenge the board. They can't even do that. Like this is a club that is solely run by, like their president is protected, their integrity is protected by, they have a wealth of money. They made some poor decisions. They decided to run back those senior players after 2018, too many years too long, and they're now starting to bite the bullet and they've found themselves in a hole. They need to find, whether it's facilitating some trades to get rid of some of these senior players. If they're going to try and latch onto some of this new, salary cap purchasing with draft picks and etc., they could be a club that try and dig themselves out of this themselves with some creative trading and off-season strategies, because they've got no one to blame but themselves. I don't know, Simo, if you agree with me there, but I have no sympathy for them because, as I said, they get everything. They've got the best stadium, they've got the richest stadium deal in the country. They literally get everything handed to them. There's no sympathy lost. I can imagine most Victorians would be along the same lines as this.
I'm going to chime in and say I'm just glad it's not us because we went down a pretty rough patch. Similar to what, I mean, not so much the injury, we're just plain bad. But these guys, I mean, they're quite terrible as well. But yeah, not many excuses. But I think just some poor, obviously poor team management. I mean, the Tim Kelly trade set them back pretty badly with their 2 first rounders. I think, not doing a fire sale. I think, a few of their players are past it. Like, I mean, they'll have to get rid of like the Andrew Gaffs. I mean, Shuey's the captain, so he won't go anywhere. But even Jack Darling is one been spoken about that's severely out of form, probably playing injured, to be fair. And most of their team playing injured. I actually really feel for Jaden Hunt, to be fair, to see him just go. But then again, like, we probably would have only offered him a couple $100,000, but he'd be probably getting double at West Coast this year. But yeah, it's bloody tough to see him just wasting away in a terrible West Coast side. But yeah, interesting one. I think they honestly need to trade. I mean, obviously they're going to be the last place team, so I reckon they definitely need to trade Harley Reid and get potentially some homegrown talent from another club and really shake things up a bit.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I had a discussion with somebody on Twitter about this, and I specifically said, I said, this isn't I agree with you, both of you. This is not a blight on the competition. This is purely a blight on the club. They dropped the ball. I mean, they had opportunities to freshen this list up with youth, and they balked because they were like, well, we're such a good club. We have to be in the finals. We have to be there. And they balked. And I think they're paying for it, because you look at it, if you look at their list, they really don't have anything under 25 that, besides maybe Oscar Allen. That's really it. I mean, after that, most of their talent and most of the money from the salary cap is going to older, out of form, and really out of touch players that are they're not getting it done. So I agree with you. I don't feel sorry I feel sorry for the West Coast fans, because they have to deal with their clubs completely buggering this up. There's just, I know, to each their own. I call me weird. I'm a weird footy fan. I have so many mates that are fans of every single club. So there's a little bit of understanding, shall I say. Again, the club has buggered this. They're going to go through it. They're going to have to trade Harley Reid, because Harley Reid has already said he doesn't want to leave Victoria. So I think they're going to flip it. They're going to try to get 2 or 3 first round picks. How they're going to do that, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be quite interesting to see how this goes, because I don't know. It is a clusterfuck, plain and simply, at the West Coast. And I don't know how it's going to get fixed. So I'm done talking about this. We will jump to it. I'm going to introduce producer Ross is hopping back on for his question of the week. Ross, throwing it to you.
What was that? O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
Ladies and gentlemen, Donnie, Tim, Simo, hope you guys are having a good one. My question for you guys this week is, I might have a skewed sense of it because I'm an American, and with football I'm kind of used to it from watching and from playing, but why do you think there's such a big commotion or controversy regarding the bye rounds? Is it too long? Do they have too many of them? I see people talk about how they should all just have one big bye round. is it as big of a deal as you think the media and maybe some fans are making out to be? Do you think it's something that is maybe a little bit overblown? Is there something normally in the middle? And then especially you, Donnie, as a American, I feel like we're kind of used to it, and no one ever complains in watching the NFL or college football about the bye week. In fact, they're calling for more bye weeks if we're adding a extra game to the season. So that's my 2 cents on it. Hope you guys have a great rest of the show. Also, by the way, just a heads up, is a follow-up from last week. Because of that trouncing by the Swans, the West Coast Eagles currently sit third all-time in terms of worst percentage points ever by the end of a season. So history might be on the verge. Have a good one, gentlemen.
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
All right, Ross, a great question, especially with this particular situation. The buys have over, especially with the introducers. So I will repeat the question, gentlemen. Why is there such an uproar about these multiple buys? This year we had 4, with 4 teams the first week, 2 teams, and then 6 and 6 these last 2 weeks. I mean, did this throw you off with kind of the constantly changing bye weeks?
It's probably a really tough one. I mean, it goes away from tradition. I know that. As a fantasy player, and then this is probably where only problem I have with it. It's bloody hard to structure your side around a bye structure, because it's been a bit of a nightmare. But I don't know, it gives teams chances, to have a rest mid-season, get players back, etc. But it's as I spoke about before. I mean, I didn't talk about it too much, but teams coming off a bye keep losing, and the only teams that have won have been playing against another team that have a bye, which luckily for Melbourne, as I said, we've got GWS who are coming off a bye as well, so we're a chance to win, which is great. But it's a real interesting thought as to why all teams have lost. I mean, is it a loss of momentum? Is it, they just went on a bit of a cheeky holiday or something and just didn't come back right? Who knows? But I think they're okay. I think it'd be really cool to have like a round where everyone has a week off, but then they showcase a young talent. I think that'd be really cool mid-season. So they have a mid-season break and then potentially another break before the finals. It's a chance for best players to come back and showcase our game with the best players. So I think that having those two breaks would be really, really smart. And like I said, just showcasing young talent and making it a bigger deal, I think it would be really good.
I don't know whether I think the gather round and adding in the extra game to the season obviously factors into this. So now that we've got 24 rounds, we've got that extra game now in the season. Honestly, from one point of view, I didn't notice too much about like the games, about the teams being on bye. I just sort of look at my phone and say like, who's playing tonight? I'm like, oh, Richmond's not playing this week. Oh, they've got a bye. And seeing that it was spread over the 4 rounds. My question is that how do you determine which team takes the bye when, and what advantage or disadvantage does that have if you've got your bye in round 12 or in round 15? Because I guess you've got teams that are then playing another 2 or 3 games potentially before they get their break. So is that an even playing field for all teams if you're not getting your bye for a few games more? I love Simo's idea about, and I know it's been floated about in the media before, like have the 1 week off, give everybody the week off, and showcase some under 18s or showcase the next crop. We know that players won't want to play a state of origin because they don't want to risk injuries and that sort of thing. Or we could do like an AFLW showcase or something along those lines. Have something that the fans can still watch for a game. Everyone seems to think that life stops, especially in the post 23 before finals. But I don't know what you think, Donnie or Sim, but like my question would be, how do they use surely use some sort of algorithm and something to determine who gets what when and look at travel and whatnot. But I'd be interested to know why certain teams get buys first and how they calculate that, because I'm sure it works out in some cases, but I think that you could really celebrate a different aspect of footy if you had a round off and celebrate it, and that way everybody gets the same round off, and then we're back to square one the following week.
Yeah, and I heard somebody say this. I think the reason that they would never do that is because then how would you fill the TV contract I think is the one kind of fight against that, which again, it's kind of a cop out because I mean, why not just play VFL, play Samful, play Waffle, play something like that. Do an under 18s championship game and put that on prime time. Do something. You could fill it with something footy related that people would be okay with. I think it's a cop out. I've also heard some people say, well, do it kind of like and again, I a few people in the comment section lose their minds because the American throwing in American sports thing is have trade week instead of the mid-season draft, the mid-season kind of, and then do a trade week. And then it's kind of that trade deadline to where like Friday, that's when it's over. So you have to have your trades due in the middle. Again, it's Americanized. I know, people, calm down. It's just an idea, but it's interesting. And I know it, and I don't know what you guys think about that. I know some people are traditionalists. They absolutely don't want to see it. But in my talks with the state league people, I would almost like to see it just because there are some state competitions that really get hurt by that midseason draft because some of the best players, it changes their season because their best player is drafted away. So, like I said, I don't know. I don't want to get into that can of worms because everybody kind of handles it differently. But I agree. I don't think that'll happen. And then the common talk that I've heard, if Tassie happens, there's going to be a bye week each week. So who misses gather round? Who gets it? Will there still be a second bye where all the teams? Again, it's so many things. It's above my pay grade. So we'll jump to it. And as I said, I've got a couple of D's fans, so I thought let's have a D's question. So I asked this gentleman with the D's loss. Unfortunately, again, not trying to throw salt or shade at all. You were 8 points back from Port Adelaide and Collingwood, and again, looking like they're running away with the minor premiership discussion. But you are only 4 points away from fifth. Are any D's fans worried right now that the top four potentially is looking a little shaky?
I think that will determine on when we find the right balance, and there's been a lot of talk about what is the right balance, and I'm sure we're good enough side to still at least make the top four, which we saw last year. It's an interesting one. I mean, you have to look a little bit closer to our draw, but we have an okay run home, and I think we've got the ability to, if we do, hit our straps. I think, well, this year's again, like last year was one of the more competitive years, but this year's even more. Obviously, with more sides vying for a top 8 position, it's crunch time every week. I mean, minus if you're playing West Coast or North Melbourne, who are actually showing a little bit of fight, actually, which has been good to see. But yeah, our run home's going to be interesting. We're actually 3 games behind the top 2, 1 game behind Brisbane. So it's going to be a bit of a push to get a home final, I'd say now. I think that's probably beyond us, thinking realistically at this point. So, if we do finish 3rd, 4th, obviously, I mean, ideally coming up against, who would you rather, Collingwood or Port Adelaide at this point? It's, both sides in pretty good nick. I mean, obviously beat Collingwood, but, you still have Collingwood at any stage this year. They can beat anyone. So, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm worried. I mean, you just take it every week as you can, and we speak about it pretty highly on the podcast, and you can only face what you've got each week, and you can only deal with what's changing, etc. And obviously, we've had to make change without Clary, but it'd be bloody good to see him get right, and to know he's missing another week just poses a question as to what actually is happening with him.
Yeah, it's not quite panic stations, but I think Melbourne have to finish top 4. I think they'd be extremely disappointed if we drop out of that top 4. We know that our best footy can match it with the elite of the competition, and right now you're looking at Port Adelaide, who are on an absolute roll, Collingwood, who just continually get it done, and as I mentioned before, Brisbane is still not quite sure about in terms of where they are consistently, but I believe that Melbourne belong in that mix in terms of the rest of the competition, because I don't believe that St Kilda, Essendon, Bulldogs, and Adelaide are the scary ones, probably a little bit that probably you wouldn't want to play, in Geelong as well too, for that matter. As Simo mentioned, they've got some serious issues that they need to address, and they've been quite open and frank about experimenting with certain things throughout this entire season, which is fine. That's great. I think you get to a point now where you should have figured out at the bye what your forward setup should look like. We're now staring down the barrel of round 16, and Melbourne needs to be able to fix their scoring issues and their connection between forward and centre, because we know the defence is going to be rock solid. The midfield has been pretty solid throughout most of the season. They're still starting to get a few new faces in there, and hopefully trying to give some of the mainstays a rest. Clary is a huge thing, and he's 1 to 2 weeks away, so they've still got to find people to plug his hole. But for Melbourne, they really need to decide what's going to shore up their attack and how they're going to deliver the ball inside 50, because Thursday night showed that, as I mentioned, I'm not worried about the scoring shots because we're getting the shots on the board. It's just about the delivery inside, and I think making sure you've got the right people putting the ball inside inside 50, because there was some just horrendous forward movement, but just not a lot of cohesion between the players that are putting the ball inside 50 and their forwards. So again, outside the top 4 would be a bit of a failure, I would say, by the end of it, because you really need to capitalise on the top tier talent that Melbourne have. You need to capitalise on it in this premiership window that we're in, because if they don't, it'll be a waste probably just having the one flag, or at least being in contention for one flag.
Yeah, it'll be quite interesting again. There's so many games still left to play, there's still lots of movement, but you sit in that precipice, a really weird kind of purgatory. It's like you want to finish in top 4 because that's where a lot of the premierships are, but you're sitting right there with a lot of teams kind of bunched up from that 5th to 12th situation. So we jump to the part of the podcast. It's a little bit Coach Hess, a little bit centric. So if you don't mind, guys, I'm going to go really, really quickly through this. I do a team of the week. When it comes to my metrics, I tend to like to do scoring shots and a little bit of everything. So you might hear a few names put in here that maybe are a little bit off, but I will explain that a little bit. And unlike the All Australians, I do try to make sure that guys are in the positions, or at least the places that they normally are. So we will start with my team of the week, started in the defense. And I like it. I have 2 D's fans, and the first player that I have is a defender from the D's, Melbourne's Trent Rivers, and the fullback line with Brisbane's Harris Andrews and Collingwood's Brayden Maynard. And the halfback line sees St Kilda's Nazaya Wanganeen Millera, Collingwood's Nick Dacos, and Hawthorn's Blake Hardwick. Out on the wings, as you guys in Melbourne know, the wings are a position that are always so much fun, especially your 2 with Lockie Hunter and Ed Langdon. But the wings today are Errol Goulden from the Sydney Swans and Collingwood's Josh Dacos. In the center, and again, I know the comment section is going to go nuts on me on this one. So in the center, we have Sydney's Chad Warner, Sydney's Luke Parker, and Gold Coast Noah Anderson. In the ruck, Jared Witts from the Gold Coast Suns. In the forwards, it's all about goals. The most goal kickers get in. So here's so much fun here. Half forward line, Sydney's Isaac Heaney, Adelaide's Tex Walker, and Fremantle's Luke Jackson. And the full forward line sees Gary Rowan of the Geelong Cats, Sydney's Logan McDonald, and Brisbane's Eric Hipwood. We jump to the bench, and I do my bench like this: defender, ruckman, midfielder, and forward. So the defender on the bench sees Fremantle's Luke Ryan. The ruck is Sydney's Tom Hickey, had himself a heck of a game for the Swans. Midfielder Jackson Clare went into the midfield a lot in this game, so that's why we decided to do midfield. And forward, Sydney's Hayden McLean. I know there's a lot of Sydney people here. The statistics is one of the reasons why, so that's why there's so many there. I know I'm going to get ate up in the comments section because I'm a Sydney supporter. So I went statistics as much as I could. I know I watched the game, so this was kind of crazy. So, guys, thoughts on this team? Because again, it was small amount of players, so it's easy to get a lot of people from one team.
That's a lot of Swans players, mate.
I
think yeah. I mean, it's a hard one to sort of decipher for you, but being a fantasy nut, I mean, that's probably where I draw my players of the week. I think probably one player that is probably a bit stiff there was hang on, you might need to double check with you here. Jordan Dawson. I thought his game was
35, but no, I don't think he had a goal. I don't think he had a goal where it was like Warner had 2, or Warner had 3, Parker had 2, Anderson had 2. I think it's Sinclair. I think Sinclair had 37, where Dawson had 35. So
Sinclair was awesome.
Yeah, so it's like because there was because I play fantasy too, and what I find fascinating is I had Josh Dunkley and Errol Goulden both on my teams, and both had quite actually nice games in this particular week. And that's what I say to most is like, I know it's kind of weird. It is a little bit more statistically based, but I say, you bring me a great discussion point. Like I know on social media, sometimes I put this out and they're like, what are you doing? Why didn't you have this? I'm like, well, give me a reason why and who you would replace. If you give me a good point, hey, I go, okay, I'll take it into consideration for my next one. It's when you get, hey, you're just a flog. What did it? It's like, okay, seriously, block, bye. I will have discussions with you. This is not a perfect science. It's a lot of fun. So I know it's kind of it's kind of thrown together. So and then we'll jump to my next part, which is again the homage to the fourth and long part of this, and that's power rankings. Ross used to do power rankings for everything. So I throw mine just a little bit differently. So I'm interested to see your guys' faces when I do this. Is I go off form. So the last 5 games are what I go off my power rankings, most consecutive victories, and then if we don't have more than 5, then I go off of how many wins in the last 5. So here's my 5. This is going to blow people's minds. At 5, the Gold Coast Suns. At 4, the GWS Giants. At 3, the Collingwood Magpies. At 2, the Richmond Tigers. And at 1, the Port Adelaide Power. I know it's a little off, but it's like if I follow my metrics, this is the way. Unfortunately, Melbourne had a loss, Geelong had a loss, or Geelong had a win, but they had lost like 2 of the last 3. So it's like there's a lot of teams that St. Kilda, the Western Bulldogs, that dropped games. So it was like this was a fun power rankings because I had to like reach for 4 and 5. You can't tell GWS and Gold Coast.
It's pretty interesting to look at Melbourne's last 5. Lost 3 of the last 5, which makes it really interesting. I think seeing Richmond in there, they're probably the bit of the dark horse that have come, post Dimmer Hardwick, and what are they, 3-1 under McWalter. So and 3 in the trot as well. And the battle of the Cats on, I think it's Thursday night. It's going to be a red hot game up at the Gabba. I can't wait for that one. It's going to be pretty exciting.
Well, that'll be that's a great transition, Sima, because we always end the episode on tipping. So, and I know looking at our time frame, I want to be sure Tim can stay all the way through the episode. So let's do our tipping really, really quickly. As he said, Thursday night up at the Gabba, Brisbane Lions, Richmond Tigers, rematch of that scintillating elimination final that we got last year. Do we see a repeat, or can Richmond go up and get a steal? Tim, we'll start with you. Who do you like in this one?
It's hard to look past Brisbane. I think Richmond, I've got a feeling Presti's out on Thursday night. I don't think Presti is playing, which I think is a huge loss for Richmond, as much as they've been in form the last few weeks. I think just Brisbane at the Gabba is too hard to go past, and hopefully if they can continue their form that they ran with against St Kilda, I think they'll be comfortable winners by sort of 15, 20 points.
Yeah, probably at the moment, one of the toughest arcs behind probably playing Collingwood at the G or Port Adelaide Oval is Brisbane at the Gabba. So I think they probably get the job done, but I think Richmond will be really competitive.
Brisbane less than 2 goals for me. I just think this is tight. Richmond's got that kind of old Richmond style footy. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see what the weather forecast is. Is it greasy? Is it nice weather to let Brisbane kind of use their skill and talent? It'll be fun. I think Brisbane, but less than 2 goals in this one. We jump to Friday night, SCG, Sydney v Geelong. I'll go first because it's my Swans. I'm gonna do kind of my reverse psychology. I'm gonna tip Geelong. I think Geelong talent wise is there. I still think they've got a little bit over, but I don't know. I think Sydney's in this until late. I just think Geelong will have Hawkins is still an interesting matchup, even if McCartan is back. Hawkins will be interesting, and Gary Rowan and Close are playing really good footy right now. So,
who we start with me? I think this is probably, to be fair, probably the match of the round. I reckon it's obviously grand final rematch, but both sides vying for a spot back in the top 8, and with Jeremy Cameron now out, poses a really interesting one. And with you guys at home, it's going to be, it won't be easy for Geelong to get the job done. And I think, with Callum Mills coming back is another big one for you guys, which, adds another dimension to your midfield. And if you do get Tom McCartan back, I reckon probably going to sway towards you boys getting the job done.
It is a hard one. I was looking at, so you've already played them this year, and they dusted you up something shocking.
GMHBA is surprisingly, Sydney's played there pretty well, but that just was not that was just not our
Nearly
day.
100
Again,
points.
danger might not play in this one, which kind of helps that midfield matchup. And
Yeah.
then Buddy should potentially be back, but some people said sometimes you throw Buddy
Leave
in
him
there
out.
and it does change things. So Tom McCartan and Buddy might be back. The interesting thing is who gets dropped.
Yeah. I want to say Sydney. I think just at the ground, I want to give them the chance because, like, I'm looking at Geelong potentially how they travel. We saw some of the young players step up on Thursday night in Tanner Bruin and Gary Rowan being able to capitalise on no Jezza Cameron there. We know that's going to be the same situation on Thursday night. I'd love to see Sydney get really up and about and kind of hopefully take what they did on Saturday afternoon, that demolition, as you said, that bit of a confidence booster and seeing some of these young players get back to, because you guys have got such young stars there, hopefully on your home deck. I'd love to see you get home in a tight one. And look, Geelong haven't been great at running out fourth quarters except for against us. So, yeah, hopefully, that kind of home ground advantage rings true and you guys can kind of just get over the line. And I'm probably going a little bit more with the heart with that one because I don't like Geelong.
All right, jump over to Adelaide Oval. Adelaide Crows hosting North Melbourne. Am I jumping too far to go? I think the Crows win this one relatively easily.
I reckon based on the bye thing, I reckon North could be in for a long day here.
Yeah,
They'll be
I
very
tend to agree
angry.
with you.
A very angry Adelaide side, I reckon. I reckon they'll come out pretty heated.
Pretty much. Well, jump Marvel Stadium. This one's intriguing for me as Western Bulldogs take on Fremantle at Marvel Stadium. I'm gonna tip Fremantle. I like Darcy being back. Darcy English, I think, is going to be an interesting match. And how does Western Bulldogs handle Luke Jackson with no Liam Jones? I think that is a matchup for disaster. Yes, Fremantle doesn't always play well outside of Perth, but I just like the way they're going, and I think the Doggies' loss of Liam Jones, I think, has still got their defense in shambles, and getting a red hot Luke Jackson is not a good time. So I like the Dockers in this one.
Interesting one. I think I'm probably going to have to lean towards the home side. I think Bontempelli's our Brownlow medalist, and I think he'll take the crown. And obviously Dacos is pretty close to him, but Bontempelli's season, I think, just on merit will get him over the line. Unless probably like a Nat 5 is probably the only one at clearance that could probably go toe to toe with him. And obviously we're seeing the drop of of Nat 5, but that game's going to be won and lost in the midfield. Obviously with Luke Jackson, if Freo can actually get the ball to him. It's going to, like you just said, I think without Liam Jones, and I think they're leaning towards Josh Bruce potentially as a backup, but he's going to be absolutely torn to shreds by Luke Jackson. And I think, it'd be a pretty tough day for him. But I'm going to sway with the Doggies. I think they're just they're sort of that hot and cold team, but I think this is probably the one that I think, home ground advantage and the way they play Marvel, I reckon gets the job done.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Simo. I think just Freo away from home. Look, I know that they beat the D's on the G, only a few weeks ago, but Freo away from home just against Dogs who have been playing some good footy. I know that they're coming off obviously coming off the bye, so their record doesn't really go in their favour with that, but hopefully they can buck the trend. I think, as you mentioned, the English matchup is going to be really, really intriguing to watch. And I could imagine also Jackson sort of running around with him as well too and spending some time there. So, no, look, I think Bulldogs in a tight contest, but it's got to be around about the 3-goal mark, I'd say.
Yeah, the most interesting one, I think, for this round, just because this could either be absolutely fantastic or an absolute blowout. Heritage Bank Stadium, formerly Metricon, Gold Coast hosts the Pies in this one. Tim, we'll start with you. Who do you like in this one?
Well, it's hard to go past Gold Coast at home, isn't it? And look, as good as Collingwood have played, they've made it territorial. They've made it a place where it's really hard for teams to go up and play against them. So, look, it's hard to tip against Collingwood, and you'd think that, as you mentioned, it's probably going to be a close one, as in who gets out on top. Look, Collingwood don't have any big injury, besides DeGoey being still out. There was no ramifications from the weekend, so I can't really see any sort of changes to that. Look, I'd love to go Gold Coast by under a goal and just sort of see a tight, gritty win, but as you said, it could go either way, couldn't it?
Yeah, this one's going to go down the wire, and I think based on normal Collingwood form, I think they'd still get the job done. I think we saw it last year where they pipped Gold Coast right at the end. I think that's probably going to happen again. I think Gold Coast are going to be really, really gutted with a close loss here.
I'm going to tip Collingwood, but I'm going to say this. If Gold Coast win it, the guy that I think that's going to give them the way to win, it's not a midfielder, it's not a forward, it's Jared Witts. If Witts can dominate Cox and Cameron in the ruck and get the taps to Rowell and Anderson and Humphreys, then Gold Coast has got a shot, because if you're constantly having to defend, how is Howe's fitness? Did Moore getting touched up by Tex Walker a little bit dent his confidence? Does Casbolt come in? Does Mabio Chol? Does King find his runs? That's going to be the thing. If Wits can get up on Cameron and give Gold Coast first things, they've got a shot. The talent is there, the skill is there. It's the execution. And what's the weather like up in Queensland at this time will be the fascinating one for Collingwood on this one. Jump to the MCG. Essendon hosts the Port Adelaide Power. I'm kind of off Essendon a little bit. Plus, they're playing a Port team that's absolutely in fuego right now. I have the Power in this one.
It's funny how you speak about the weather. Sorry to jump in here, but would it be fair to say it's going to be dewy?
Yeah, potentially. I love it.
Like that one. Yeah, this one. Do you know what? I'm going to go with the bye round here, and I reckon Bombers knock off Port Adelaide in a big upset where Essendon gets their season back on track. I think they're going to have nice plans for Butters and Rosie, and I reckon Port are going to cop the bye round. The bye round, drama.
I can't say it, Sim. I can't. I don't. I have to go with Donnie here. There was nothing really on Saturday night that kind of reinstalled the faith from Essendon, and Port are just too much on a roll, and they're playing good footy anywhere they go. Again, look, Essendon's forward structure didn't really do much for me on Saturday night, and I think Port Adelaide just have too many weapons, and even in the middle as well too. I think the class of their young guns against the likes of Parrish, Merritt's like really the only one that's really sort of stood up a little bit inside the middle there, and no, I think Port Adelaide get it done comfortably.
So I'm one of those. I agree with you, Sima. I understand that, but it's the fact that Essendon's got to go all the way out to Perth and all the way back, and it's always interesting sometimes that trip out to Perth, how it affects guys there. But I mean, it's a great thought. I just think Port actually that bye came good because it makes them even stronger. But I don't know. I mean, I could see it. I could definitely see it for sure. Another one, a very, very interesting one here. I'm interested what you guys think on this one. Melbourne Cricket Ground, Hawthorn v Carlton. Who do you like in this one, Tim? He's
You're
muted.
Mute,
Sorry.
No problem.
Tough one.
It is tough.
Mm-hmm.
The part of me that likes to, no, not commiserate with Carlton fans, but part of me that like can just picture Hawthorn getting on top of Carlton. They should get a good crowd there. I think they'll get a good showing from both supporter bases at the G. But yeah, I think look on paper you have to think that Carlton gets the job done, but I can see it also that Hawthorn pushes them as well too. And like, Sicily's still out for another game, isn't he? Or two games?
One more after this.
So like, they've got to shore up some stuff there, but I don't know. Does the neutral supporter in me want to see Hawthorn beat Carlton just for the spectacle that will be afterwards? Yes. But from a footy brain point of view, you'd think that, yeah, Carlton should get over the line, but stranger things have happened. So I know it doesn't give you an answer. Look, I'm going to go Carlton by 18, but again, like, I'd love to see Hawthorn nip them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, sorry to touch on back on the Essendon Port game. I witnessed what Essendon did against Port Adelaide over at Adelaide Oval, and they could have snuck away with that. They lost by 5 points over there, and I thought just Essendon's brand does stack up against a fast Port Adelaide side, so that'll be a bit of a shootout. I reckon that, well, judging on the weather, I think that'll be probably close to match of the round as well. Mm-hmm. My choice is Carlton. I think Sicily's too much of a big out. I think with Charlie Curnow and Mackay running around, not so much Mackay. Oh, actually, do you know what? Curnow's actually been really down on his form, and I think from in particular his first 6-7 rounds where he was just amazing. I think they've just got too much to try and cover, and I don't think they can do it without Sicily down there. Kudos to Will Day. I'm pretty sure Will Day started playing a similar role to what Sicily did. Good for fantasy. I just think Sicily is just too much to cover, and I think Carlton probably get the job done, and I think they start getting some form back. I think, again, it's one of those bye ones, but I think the trend will be ducked this round with probably about 3 of those wins happening.
Yeah, that's how I kind of took it. No Sicily. That takes a lot of the cornerstone out of that back line. And I think Hawthorn just doesn't have the firepower to just play offensive footy with Carlton in this one. So Carlton will win this one. I mean, TO Stadium, Melbourne Demons the Gold Coast versus GWS Giants. I see both you rocking your D stuff. I'm going to tip the D's in this one. I know you guys are going to tip the D's. I don't see either of you tipping against your club, do I?
Nope.
Both shake their head for
never.
those podcast people, so we won't even go through this one. I just think D's too strong. GWS is one of those where they're a little too helter skelter. I think the D's structure everything up a little bit. Hopefully you get Clary Oliver back. Unfortunately, I don't think so. We'll have to see. I don't think so. Everything that I saw. So we'll just jump up Optus Stadium, last game of the round. The potential hiding again. West Coast Eagles versus St. Kilda Saints. Do we give West Coast any chance, or is this another percentage booster for the Saints?
This is a percentage booster, mate. I think. Well, do you know what? West Coast haven't been overly bad or 100 points bad, apart from Carlton. I have to double check all the stats, but they actually seem to show up. I mean, you'd hope they show up after 170-point belting. I think Jeremy McGovern's close, I believe, so he'll, obviously take away King's impact, but yeah, I think it's pretty hard to look. It's pretty hard to tip West Coast in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, I think St Kilda by about 10 goals, because I think St Kilda's game plan's so defensive. I think it's a bit of a hard one to see them belting aside, but it could be another percentage booster and confidence booster like what Sydney got. But yeah, I reckon about 60 points.
Yeah, I think it'll be a comfortable win. I think the most intriguing thing we'll see the fan output. Like, what are you going to see from the fans coming out? And how they're going to show their support at home? They're always going to have that little bit extra there. You just want to see the effort and intent, but yeah, easily a St Kilda win. You can't question that. I don't think. Big week for the club.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Do they get Farrell? Do they get Farrell if it starts getting out of hand, for sure? So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for everything that we are going to do. As thankfully we got this in. This has been a blast. I love chatting with these guys, everything D's, and it was fun to be able to talk everything AFL for this episode. So again, for anybody that watches this show that may be a huge Demons fan, just really quickly about the Attention to Detail podcast, because I like letting you guys have a little bit of repub. I love working with fellow podcasters. Just a little bit about how we can get a hold of Attention to Detail.
Oh, sorry, Sam. I thought you were going to jump in.
that's your plug, mate.
No, that's all right. No, so it's Attention to Detail podcast. It's D with a double E to be pretty lame with the puns there. But you can find us on all your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And yeah, just a couple of D's nuffies talking shit about the D's and highs and lows. And it's our weekly reviews and the occasional special guest here and there. But no, Donnie, thanks for having us, mate. It's been great fun to catch up again. It's always good chatting with you. But yeah, as you said, nice to talk about the broader footy world, not just Demons in our D's bubble as well too.
100%. It's got jump in here too. I was going to say it's destination stop Toby Green week, so he always likes to dominate us. But it's been a pleasure, Donnie, and thanks for having us on board, being able to chat not only about the D's, but all things AFL, because obviously a bit of a footy nuffy and fantasy nuffy, so it's been awesome chatting away.
Yeah, always enjoy it. Like I said, I love working with other fellow podcasters because I think it's the best thing is the footy podcasting world is always so much fun. There's such great people. Like I said, I have 3 other footy podcasts over here in the States, and I go back and forth with all of them all the time. And it's always a ton of fun. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our episode today. Again, more coming VFL, Sandful, and Waffle stuff along as per usual with AFL and AFLW, along with interviews. Keep an eye out. I have a few things in the fire that I cannot wait to share with you. So that's going to do it for our episode. For our episode today, this has been another episode of Donnie's Disposal.